Good morning. So I've been talking for about the last week on the 4 mind-turning reflections, sometimes just called the 4 reminders. So you might remember, if you've seen any of those videos, that the first one was the preciousness of human life. The second one is impermanence, and the third one was the law of karma. So I've said something about each of these, and today I'm going to be talking about the fourth one, which is the defects of samsara. The defects of samsara. And it might not sound a very encouraging, uplifting, inspiring sort of talk to be talking about defects, but actually we need to be clear what it is we're turning away from and what it is we're turning towards, which I'll talk about another time, what we're turning towards. Because otherwise we're only half-hearted in the way that we practice. So what is this samsara? What is it? Well, it's something that we create ourselves through living in a world that is quite difficult anyway. And it's difficult partly because we've got a body. A body is actually quite a difficult thing, a human body. It's wonderful, it's precious, but actually it's also impermanent. But it's impermanent in particular ways. So when we're talking about the defects of samsara, we are also talking about dukkha, this word that effectively means something like an ill-fitting wheel. You know, we have this sense deep down that things aren't quite right. So dukkha has some outwardly obvious things that cause us suffering. So birth is suffering, old age, sickness and death, being parted from what we love, and having to put up with what we would rather not have to put up with. All those things that are undeniably dukkha. This is the wonderful thing about Buddhism, is that we can check for ourselves. Is that right? Are they really dukkha? So one of that list that sometimes people think, well, why is that dukkha, is birth. I mean, quite obviously, it's a very painful experience for the mother to go through birthing a child. But actually, there's something deeper than that, much more long-lasting. And that is that once you have given birth, that child that becomes an adult, you see it through all the difficulties, and you feel responsible, you feel empathic with, and their suffering is your suffering. And from the time of their birth, you know that deep down. Gosh, you've given birth to something that is so dependent on you. And you know that's going to bring great joy, hopefully, but it's also inevitably going to bring suffering. You know, your child will not do what you want it to do. It'll be its own person, and that separation itself can be suffering. Obviously, we don't like to get sick, and we don't like to get old, and we don't want to die. So those are all very clear, aren't they? But as I've talked about previously, you know, we are not in control. We will also be parted from things that we like and would rather not be parted from, whether that's relationships or jobs or just losing something. Even that can be very painful. So yes, the defects of samsara are the dukkha that we experience. But of course we make a lot of that experience for ourselves by craving. Simply by craving, by wanting things to be a certain way, and finding it very difficult to let go, to give up wanting that control, to be able to relax into our present experience. So one of the ways I describe it is we're very often leaning forward. We're leaning forward, always wanting something else or a new experience, or we're bored and we look for distractions. And all that is quite painful. And it also gets us into a lot of trouble. You know, a lot of, well, the trouble it gets us into really is because it pits us against other people. You know, if we have, if we want, it sets up a competitiveness, you could say, in ourselves. So why do we need to dwell on the defects of samsara? What's the point of dwelling on it? You know, most of us, well, we want to forget about it, don't we? Well, the Buddha said that there is another way, which I'll talk more about later, another time. There is another way. And if we can explore for ourselves, now it doesn't have to be through Buddhism. You know, you could do it through, I mean, I happen to be a Buddhist, so that's what I'm talking about. But it could be through some other spiritual life. But I think it has to be through a spiritual life, because what it means to really reflect on samsara means turning away, getting such a deep understanding that ultimately we will turn away and be able to renounce some of what is problematic for us. We will be willing to turn away, and that's not easy. You know, you probably know it isn't easy, but if you don't know yet, it isn't easy. Even knowing what is in our mind, even meditating for 1 minute without getting distracted, can be quite difficult, you know, if we're not used to doing it. So, you know, we're a bundle of selves. We're all over the place. We set intentions and then we can't keep them. So, you know, we need a path. We need to find a spiritual path that actually helps us. And if I were to recommend how you might evaluate what spiritual path you choose or what spiritual path you're on, I would say, does it lead to the end of suffering without you having any bizarre beliefs about a God existing, about there being someone that's going to save you, you know, about you doing it yourself and following a path? Have you got a path that you have got that confidence in, that you have tried its methods and you know that they work, and then you have confidence that actually it could lead to the end of suffering? Because that's what the Buddha said, that's what he promised. And when we really practice, we really see that that's possible. And it's possible from our experience of meditation, of practicing the precepts, of understanding how when we put others first, when we forget, when we manage at those little times to forget about self, about guarding self, about looking after the self, about putting self before everything else, when we manage to do that, there is tremendous liberation. And liberation, total liberation, is what the Buddha promised. So we need to understand about the defects of samsara. We need to know what we need to leave behind, what will help us to leave behind. So as I often say, craving only leads to more craving. It can't do anything else. Once we feed it, if we feed our craving, it grows. Whatever we feed grows. So the more we do something, the habits that we make are really important. So if we can have the confidence to really reflect on samsara, on all that list that I have just mentioned, you know, on birth, on old age, sickness and death, when we can see that our pride, say in youth or health, is empty because we can't keep it, it's impermanent, then we can start to really look for what's going to matter in our lives, for what can really help. So I hope that's given a few hints. Bye for now.